Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. So, today I'm here with Brady Dowling. He is creator of the app Neurture and host of the Adaptive Mind podcast. So, we're going to be digging into all things mental health, probably a little neuroplasticity, especially in relationship to recovery and addiction, but also just more generally speaking as well. And so, hello, Brady. How's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm excited for our chat.
Me too. And you're also a fellow masshole, which is cool.
That's true. Yep, just down the road from you.
Yes, so we have that immediate bond, which is nice. Although, were you originally from Massachusetts? I forget.
Yeah, so I've slingshotted. I grew up around here, went out west for school, and work, and then came back here a few years ago. So yeah, back here.
Drew you back in. Couldn't stay away.
Yeah, you can't stay away.
I know. It's funny. I was born on the West Coast, but then my family moved here. So, little opposite, but all landed back in the same place, and I do love it here now. So, yes, so welcome. So happy you're here. And I always start with kind of the same, just general question so we can get to know you better. What led you to where you are today, particularly with the creation of the Neurture app and the Adaptive Mind podcast? I want to hear more about all that. So, dive in.
Yeah. Um, so I think my relationship with technology has played a huge role. Um, Even as a kid, like I was super interested in computers and video games and whatever it is. And kind of like finding that balance has
Mm-hmm.
been a challenge for me. And I think today most people struggle with that. But when I was a kid, like discovering Facebook for the first time when it first came out, like
Mm-hmm.
using MySpace for the first time, um, and like all of these other things that were kind of brand new, just like exploring the wild west of the internet, which we'll always have like newer and newer things. But this was like the very beginning of social media, um, video games. Like we've seen a huge transformation in video games, but going from like Super Nintendo to PlayStation and Nintendo 64 and kind of going from just having Mario jump up and down to having like real rich storylines to online gaming and me kind of growing up in the middle of all this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not even to mention pornography and that going from like magazines that it's impossible to get your hands on to everyone gets it for free anytime you want. Um, so like all of these things growing up in the midst of this, and I can remember when I was in seventh grade, and I was like so excited for this video game to come out, for NBA Street to come out, and I got it the very first day, and then just like waking up and playing it before school when I should be getting ready for school. I should be like getting my lunch ready, and just a small thing like that where I look back and I see like this this relationship that I have with technology, this impacted my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of good that technology does and gives to us. Um, but in several different places, it's kind of taken me out of control and into a place where I look back and I'm like, you know what, that wasn't so helpful. I think I could have made better decisions. But I really didn't feel like I was in control in that instance. Like I feel like I could have made better decisions, but it wasn't really in me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So having several different instances like this, and this just being a very small one. Um, I also remember being in college, a freshman in college, and freshman year in college for a lot of people is like the most social time of your life. You're like meeting all these new people and having all these new experiences. And I remember one day at my university, YouTube was blocked. And so a lot of people would like talk about how to get YouTube. And I remember one day sitting in my dorm room at night on like a Friday or Saturday night, like working on getting YouTube access in my dorm room. And my roommate was like 6 feet away from me and he was playing Final Fantasy. And so we were both just like in a moment where we should have been at the prime of our social lives. And yet we were sitting inside like a 12 by 12 box, staring at a screen, doing something
Mm.
so incredibly inconsequential long term that like it just now it sounds so silly. And so anyway, these experiences, like piece by piece throughout my life, have kind of brought me to this point where I'm like, you know, it's not, this isn't going to kill me, I hope, but this is something that I want to change and I care about this. And, I've tried several different things. And for me, the first solution is like, okay, what kind of apps can I find for this? And like look at blockers and productivity things and all that kind of stuff. Um, and so anyway, I didn't feel like there was anything really that good. Fast forward a few years ago, 2021, during the pandemic still, but I was working for a mental health company, big mental health company, um, valued at over $1 billion. So like they have their stuff together, so to speak, and they have a lot of resources. And I remember us having several different users giving feedback like, where are your resources for alcohol use disorder? I'm drinking
Mm.
too much. Where are your resources for this? And their response basically was like, we don't have those resources, and that's not a priority for us right now. Um, which I think that's a crappy like that's a sucky response. Everyone has to prioritize their stuff, but where I was sitting in my seat, I was like, I can so easily relate to someone that feels out of control with their behavior,
Mm.
and that wasn't good enough for me. So these experiences kind of like embedded into me and kind of grew over time. And at a certain point, I was like, you know what? Sobriety counters and motivational quote apps, these are not sufficient. We need evidence-based approaches and techniques that are available to people everywhere, not just people that can pay for therapy or coaching or whatever it is. Like we need these things and they should be available to everyone.
Yeah, wow. Okay, there's so many things you talked about that I want to mention. And first, before I touch on those, I want to say, okay, next, I want you to explain the app itself in more detail, just to share like how you shifted and what you created with the Nurture app. But I just want to say, so much of what you mentioned I feel is so relevant, especially now in terms of like how do we evolve alongside technology, when it's especially even more so now with AI and all of these things, like how do we coexist in harmony with that. And I'm a firm believer that these technologies we're building can be they're a reflection of the consciousness using it. And so it is really, how do we control our use of technology and not let it control us? Even with AI, how can we use it to enhance our creativity instead of take it over? Or you mentioned like the prevalence of pornography and how it's literally everywhere. And I think most millennials can totally relate to that experience. Like I grew up, I think the first year of MySpace was, when I was in high school, it started. So I don't know how old you are. I'm 37, but like I remember a time before social media, and it's just crazy to think that our kids are just never going to remember a time where that didn't exist. And I just don't think we can always fully understand the harms that come alongside extreme use of all of these things and exposure to all these things at such a young age. And I think it's being talked about a lot more, but we are like the final frontier of generations that have it as a major part of our lives, but like there was a time when it wasn't. And so that's kind of been a cool perspective for us all to have, like, whoa, we are gonna be like, back in my day we didn't have
Yeah.
this shit.
Yeah.
And the other thing you said when you're like, oh, just a silly example, but so true, that such a great illustration of how you and your roommate are sitting there in this 12 by 12 box with technology and just completely ignoring, like, the fact that it is a time of vibrant socializing when we're in college, but even connection with each other. Isn't it crazy to think like we're 10 feet away from another person and we can be sitting there like balls deep in our phone, just like not even paying attention to the human next to us? And sometimes even going out in public, I don't know, when you just look around and it just seems like we're all such disconnected humans like coexisting in ways without interacting, when you really start paying attention to how much, even at dinners or social events or being at the coffee shop, when you're like, wow, you walk in and every single person is on their phone, or at dinner when people just seem, it's so much more normalized for people to be increasingly on their phone, when it's like, what is this? And I do see COVID and the pandemic having kind of pushed people to a point where they are searching for more in-person community, because we were so limited to technology for a while. And I started doing in-person like women's circles, and I've been surprised at how popular they've been, especially because they're for like sober and sober curious women. I'm like, wow, people really want in-person connection without alcohol. And so yeah, the pendulum does seem to swing from extreme to extreme, but witnessing it like on all ends of the extreme and actually being present and observing it, it's like, wow. I mean, I notice it in myself a lot too, how connected I am to my phone and how naked I feel without it sometimes. A client and I were actually talking about that, where she was saying she left her phone in her car and she almost had like a minor like moment of panic. I was like, I'm just going into the store. Like, I don't need my phone in there, And then subsequently went in and had a nice exchange with someone in the store, and it made her realize maybe I should intentionally leave my phone behind more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and there having the awareness is an important piece. And for so many people and for so long, that awareness isn't there. And that's true of each of us in different pieces of our lives. So I'm not trying to elevate myself above anybody else, but even just having the awareness is like a very important step of being able to
right.
make choices that actually align with your values.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that's even part of, the app is like, what are your values? And awareness is the stuff, awareness, the stages of change. And just a lot of times being in awareness is like the really uncomfortable space because you haven't quite changed yet, but you're aware that you want to. But yeah, there is a lot of unconscious just behaviors and patterns we don't even realize sometimes that are just not aligned with who we really want to be. And it's going to be even more of something that we have to be vigilant about. It's like they're coming out with microchips and stuff. So it's like it's only going to be more and more able to check out whenever you want. So it's interesting. And so tell me more about the landscape of the app. What if you were to like walk someone through the basics of using it, what would that look like and how can it help people?
Yeah. So I would say they're like the very core of the app. One of the biggest pieces is this check-in, which I think you kind of mentioned. Um, and in a check-in, there's three different, approaches that you can take. You can either say, I'm feeling an urge to engage in whatever behavior, you choose whatever behavior you're struggling with or having a challenge with or that you want to focus on. You can say I'm having an urge, or no, I slipped. I had a challenging day or whatever it is. So you can kind of have that reflective approach, or you can just log an emotion, check in with how you're feeling, how you're doing, stuff like that. And that'll take you into this kind of non-judgmental, neutral check-in state. The idea is not to say like good day and bad day, but again, like we talked about, just to kind of gain awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then also to kind of take a step away from whatever emotional state that you're in, and to become more of an observer of your own situation, to notice like, how am I feeling? What kind of led to this? Are there any coping mechanisms that I've tried or that I could try that could be helpful? So trying to get some distance from whatever heightened emotional state you might be in if you're in an emotional state. So getting separation from the urge, getting separation from if you're feeling guilt or shame or maybe apathy, whatever it is. So anyway, trying to get that awareness and some separation so you can kind of think with your more logical and higher mind. And then after that check-in process, and in more like therapeutic and clinical circles, that would be called an EMA, so an ecological momentary assessment. So outside of that check-in process, there's also courses. So these are courses, to teach you about how the habit loop works and how triggers work and about the value of self-compassion and a lot of things that are evidence-based that we don't necessarily hear or talk about with habits or compulsions or addictive behaviors. Generally, you might hear or see like a 12-step meeting, which can be very helpful. But there are a lot more resources beyond that. So anyway, kind of at the core, you've got the check-in and the courses. And then there's also there's meditations. There's also coming up with a coping plan. So if you feel like you're in an urge, and like a lot of times when we feel urges or we feel highly emotional, we don't actually we can't like think with a very logical mind. And so even if we've come up with a plan, like if I feel the urge to drink, I want to, call my wife. I want to walk outside and take 3 deep breaths, whatever it is. I've come up with some kind of plan in my mind. Once I get into that state of feeling that urge, I can't access that plan because I can't think in the same way that I'm thinking right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do ABC. And so even just having a plan written down, or in this case, in the app, and being able to look at it and say, okay, now I'm going to do that thing that I said I was going to do, that can be tremendously helpful. And so thinking ahead, like, what will I do in this case, is a piece of the app that, users get access to a variety of different coping mechanisms and ways to regulate in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they can kind of pick and choose what they think would be most helpful for them, and then really use it in that moment. If they're feeling an urge and they've locked an urge, then they can see like, okay, here's my coping plan. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Yes, it reminds me a lot. I was watching a video and a little mini training on emotional brain training, and just talking a lot about how when we're in activated states, we can't really create sustainable behavior change. And a lot of times, those activated stressors and states are the very things that trigger us into addictive behaviors and compulsions anyways. So it's like such a double-edged sword by actually addressing that heightened stress state more regularly and proactively with awareness, being able to identify you're even in it, because not only can you not really perpetuate calm, logical, productive changes in your life in any sort of consistent way if you're kind of chronically in activated or triggered states, but those higher states of stress are also going to kind of trigger some of our more maladaptive, like escape hatches, and so learning in emotional brain training. Have you heard of emotional brain training?
No.
Yeah, I hadn't really either, or maybe, I don't know, I'm like, EBT, is that a thing I had heard of, but the training that I did talked a lot about just taking inventory of the state that you are in and connecting it to how you're feeling in your body, expressing it a little bit, like, I'm feeling this way because of this, like actually naming any guilt, shame, anger, expressing it and feeling where it's located in your body, kind of connecting it to that somatic piece, and then finding an alternative and more elevated thought. And that even getting in that creates like this sort of 2-hour window where like you can rewire with new behaviors and stuff as well, transitioning out of it. So it's really fascinating and reminds me a lot about what you're talking about now. And especially too, I think it's really important when we connect that thinking brain to what's going in our body. I feel like so many of us are disconnected from the cues of stress within our body too, and or even recognizing that we are operating at chronic levels of stress. I think most of us are just almost used to it as well. So that said, the name of your podcast is The Adaptive Mind. And so I wanted you to share more about what does that mean to you and how is it beneficial in terms of habit change and our overall health and well-being?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of big fan of a podcast called The Addicted Mind.
Mm.
And so I've heard a lot of stories on that podcast, and I think it's great. Um, but I'm also just a fan of the belief that we can change, that we can, we can adapt. Um, and so this idea of neuroplasticity and like the fact that we can have a growth mindset, all of that kind of thinking is really appealing to me and
Mm.
empowering. And I think it's also really important that we just adopt that mindset. Um, and so once we adopt that mindset, that kind of enables us to actually put it into place. Um, so anyway, this idea of having an adaptive mind, I think it expands and goes a lot further than just overcoming a challenging behavior that someone's struggling with, but it's kind of a mindset that is beneficial through all areas of our life. Um, and so another kind of piece and motivation for starting it is that by trade, I'm a software engineer, and I've done a lot of research and I've learned a lot of different things about how our minds work and different ways of handling certain situations. But I'm really, when it comes down to it, I'm not the expert. Since I've started the app, I've been working with clinical psychologists on it and getting a lot of feedback and input. And I want to also make any knowledge that I get available to everyone else. I'm sure that's many people's motivations for starting a podcast. But the other thing is, like, a lot of people just don't want to install an app that's not the right fit for them. And that is totally fine. Everyone has something that works for them. But anyway, I wanted to kind of lean on expert knowledge, make it available to everyone. Um, and yeah, just have it in a format that is not necessarily an app. So again, we can
Mm.
reach more people.
Yeah. Woo, I love what you said about the adaptive mind and the growth mindset, reaching so far beyond habit change. And I do feel, as adults, we sometimes lose our spirit of curiosity or a beginner's mind. And a lot of our, you know, maladaptive thought patterns that do create stress in our lives are rooted in like one bad experience. Without further examination, we don't realize like how limiting it is. And even with what you were saying, I feel like it's so helpful even on a collective level to just have more of an open-minded, curious way of thinking, because what I observe too is it seems like a lot of people seem very fixed in their perspectives, which can lead to so much polarization in the world in general, where like, this is my stance and other people are absolutely wrong, instead of kind of being more nuanced and curious and thoughtful about other people's lived experiences, and realizing a lot of your fixed beliefs are rooted in like isolated experiences that other people haven't had, and that we are all shaped by those individual experiences as perspectives and beliefs, not facts. And so for me, adopting more of an adaptive, curious, malleable like mindset with my own self has like opened me up to offer that to other people as well. And it's created not just harmony in my own life, but like harmony in relationships across differences, and recognizing like there's aspects of my own life I didn't even realize were dictating my perspective. Maybe this person doesn't realize that either, or maybe they had a totally different perspective that makes them feel super firmly in their belief, just like one of my experiences makes me feel super firmly in my own beliefs. And obviously there's certain, non-negotiables that I'm not willing to like entertain, like if you're going to be mean or hurtful to people or whatnot. But outside of that, I think it's really allowed me to see a wide variety of perspectives with more curiosity instead of animosity. And that itself is also healing when we're not holding resentment towards people just because they think differently than us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like you said, there are certain things that we have to hold on to and kind of keep those as our core. But yeah, being curious and being just exploratory about other people's experiences, as you mentioned, um, going from other people's experiences, like there's so much to learn and take from
Mm-hmm.
what someone else has lived through, and we're never going to be able to live all of someone else's experiences. So to be able to chat through that and kind of take that from what they've learned is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of anything we do, I find anything that we do on a personal level that really helps us heal and grow is really only, honestly, many times only going to benefit other people, like help collective healing, even if it's hard things like, okay, wow, this person, I need to create some boundaries with this person. Maybe that'll help them reflect on themselves more than, you know. So I just think whenever you're truly adopting a growth mindset within yourself, that ripple is going to be beneficial into like the ecosystem around you and more of a ripple of healing into the world as well. So, yes, I love that. I am so excited as well to be, I'm going to be on the Adaptive Mind podcast. So, tune into that and make sure everyone, if you're here and listening, to find Brady. It's on Spotify
Yeah,
and
it's on Spotify. Yep, The Adaptive Mind.
yeah, the Adaptive Mind podcast, Brady Dowling. Tune in. Good one, good resource. So, we talked a little bit too about, you know, this urge to check out, and we touched on how you kind of design the app to help people work through addiction, their triggers. And it's meant to be for, you know, multiple forms of addiction, not like specifically alcohol or just any sort of compulsive behavior, and really helping nurture habit change. And so I know you and I, off of this call, had talked a little bit about checking out in general and how we all have our different ways of checking out. And I'm curious about your thoughts about what you think contributes to like our sort of universal human condition of like wanting to check out and escape. Like, what are the contributing factors to that in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's kind of two pieces. One, as you mentioned, it's just kind of like how we are as humans. I think at least you and I, we live in like this certain society. We like have our computers, we're doing, you know, whatever things are normal to our lives. But for someone that lives in a more, you know, rural community, a more rural population, for someone that lives with no technology, for someone like no matter who it is, that person is going to want some sort of escape from whatever's in their life. You know, no one, I don't know of anybody that doesn't want an escape in some kind of way that, um, yeah, just everyone wants an escape. So I think there's that piece of it, which is just like, it's just normal for us to seek other experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's another piece of it, which is that, you know, we live in, again, many of us live in this society. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably live in a society where it's pretty high stress. We're looking at our screens a lot. We're, you know, we have a lot of different factors that are kind of like stressful for us, that are challenging for us. And then on the other side, like escape is so easy these days. We have most of us within like 1 minute could get access to the two F's, food and phone. And you like can escape to both of those so easily. You can get super high sugar and whatever in your food, salt, whatever is going to do the trick for you, crunchy, like really interesting eating experience. And then we also have, phones which just have videos and
Yeah.
streaming and,
And
posts. So anyway,
substances, like too, like weed and alcohol is like everywhere too.
yeah, I mean that's not even to mention everything else, but just those two alone, you can access it within probably 60 seconds, no
Yeah.
matter who you are. Even if you're a kid, like small children can access those things so fast. So the accessibility in general, and to your point, weed and alcohol, like now you can have them delivered. You like it's on the corner. 20 years ago when I was a kid, like if someone was smoking weed, then they really had to really figure out how to go get it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, the accessibility for just so many of these things is way higher. And so to be able to get to that escape much faster, it just naturally is going to make it happen so much more.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think that's very true. Is like that kind of human desire to escape reality is always there, and when it comes down to like creating alignment within yourself and doing the inner work on a continual basis versus like seeking an escape, it's like yeah, like most people are like, oh, okay, well this just feels like a little easier. And even when you are doing the inner work, and self development and stuff, like I was just talking about this the other day, where it's like that gets exhausting too, and you're like, I just want to check out with some Real Housewives for like a little bit and watch some like crazy ladies screaming at each other and getting drunk. Like that's, I can't think about like all these psychological concepts anymore. But I'm curious as well, because sometimes when I look at our society as a whole and like our conditioning and programming, I do almost feel like we are conditioned towards escapes and like encouraged. Like it's, you're actively going against your programming of like drinking culture, of quick fixes, of like pop culture when you're seeking to kind of take the route of inner work. Would you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on like our societal programming around escapes and like them being marketed to us and almost in a way where it seems like control? But that's just me. I'd love to hear
Yeah,
your.
no, totally. I mean, um, I have two main thoughts here. One is that you talked about like doing the inner work, and even when you're doing the inner work and working really hard, you still want to escape. And of course, that's natural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that in addition to doing the inner work, um, just to use a very small example, earlier I mentioned that like I wanted to solve my problems with technology because that's kind of like my mindset.
Yeah.
And so I would think of like productivity tools and blockers. Um, and in addition to doing the inner work, I think there is also environmental design that we can do that will make our escapes less accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's a helpful piece. And it's not going to solve our problems to put my phone in a drawer in the basement. That's not going to solve my problem, but it's going to make it a lot more helpful for me than if my phone is right here. Right now, it's within 6 inches of my hand.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, even if I'm doing all this inner work and working on myself emotionally and whatever, figuring out all my triggers, all that kind of stuff, if my phone is 6 inches away, then it's I'm not going to be able to overcome all that, right? If I have drugs and food and weed, whatever it is, if I have those things immediately accessible all the time, no matter how much inner work I do, yeah, I probably will just go back to the escape, right? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
there is like this certain balance that each person has to find of I have to take care of my environment. I have to make this inaccessible or whatever it is. A lot of people do moderation and that's great. Like we can't just get rid of everything in life, but um, there's like this balance of I have to make this less accessible to me. And then I
Mm-hmm.
also have to work on myself emotionally. And the other piece that you talked about is kind of how these things are being marketed to us. And I was just watching, I think, a football game the other day, and I saw a commercial for a sports betting app, which is very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a movie star and a sports superstar, and they were talking and they were like endorsing the sports betting app. And you know, in moderation, whatever, if it works for people, sports betting, if that's your cup of tea, whatever. But as you said, it's being marketed like constantly to us.
Yeah.
Food, gambling, whatever, all of these different things are constantly just being kind of thrown at us, to see what's going to stick. And for us to end up in a place where we have these maladaptive coping mechanisms, the first thing that a lot of people think is like, what's wrong with me? Like you look at the instance
You're like,
with,
you've literally been like trained. You have to
yeah,
actively go against like the programming of the Matrix to be like,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah,
I
exactly.
don't want to be like,
Yeah,
gambling, eating fast food, with 10 chronic diseases, eating, it's like it is a little overwhelming kind of waking up to all the programming. And sorry for cutting you off. Go
yeah, no, no.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, you see an instance like Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier, who are NBA players, and they were caught in this gambling thing. And you see an instance like that, and you're like, what's wrong with them? They're making millions of dollars a year, and they're doing this thing for 50. They like are risking all that for $50,000. This doesn't make sense. And it's like, yes, it does not make sense, actually. And it's not because they're bad people, probably. Um, there's so much that's gone into this, and the fact that gambling and all these things are being shoved down our throats, sometimes metaphorically and sometimes literally,
Yeah,
like that's playing into it constantly, and we're all dealing with that.
right. That's like a huge thing I've, thought about with drinking culture and how even recently, they did the press conference with Dr. Oz and they touched upon the changing dietary guidelines, this and that. And like for me, I'm just like, I have not trusted the government with my health for a long time. But I do still think there's important implications to like what they say and how it influences people. And for Dr. Oz to be like, well, like alcohol is a social lubricant and like there's nothing healthier than having a good time and like the blue zones. Meanwhile, it's like, you guys literally allow chemicals in our food that aren't allowed in Europe. They exercise, they have more active lifestyles, more meaning and purpose, more community, but you're going to say that it's like the alcohol. And for me, it's like, I am totally like, we all have our vices. I'm sure like Real Housewives isn't like contributing to good health for me, but I do feel that like there is some responsibility for them to like give people, the honest picture. Hey, it's not great for you, but like do what you want to do with that information. But then again, it's like it is that the lobbyists and industry that profits on us, not being empowered and healthy and like the kind of systems that are formed based on that. And so to your point, when people are like, what's wrong with me? It's like, listen, honey, nothing's wrong with you. Okay. Like our systems are like literally meant to like have you like drunk and unhealthy and sleeping. And so I think, it can be quite overwhelming to start to realize like, oh wow, if like I want to be healthy minded and I really have to take control of my life, and it's going to be kind of going against the grain of the easy out that a lot of people are being programmed with. And even in addition to that, can make people like a little resentful when you're like, actually no, I'm going to take full responsibility for my health and mind, body, and spirit. I'm not listening to these fools like you are. Not that that's what I would ever say, but even though I just did. But it is like it's confrontive to people who are like not examining their programming more scrupulously, and so it is tough. It's like an uphill battle to be like, no, I really want to take accountability for my life and examine some of these like behaviors, patterns and stuff that like we normalize so much. And that awareness started for me with drinking, but then it like very quickly with the removal of alcohol awakened my eyes to a lot more that we are kind of polluted with in terms of like what we're really capable of and what real health means and who you have to rely on for that and all of that. And so I love that you're like creating this tool to empower people with taking that back for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So I was actually listening to one of your recent podcast episodes where you were just talking about how kind of stepping away from these substances or whatever it is that's given you the ability to almost level up spiritually and like have this have more clear thinking and be on almost like a higher plane.
Mhm.
And I think that I guess I just completely agree with that. Like when I'm in a situation where I'm like, I would love to have a chocolate chip cookie, or like all I want right now is like to sit on the couch and like watch this thing. Those those thoughts aren't very sophisticated. They're like very, very basic and primal.
Mhm.
And so when I'm in a mode where I'm just like thinking these kind of primal thoughts, then that's not leading me to, live in line with my values to like take the next step, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, being in this spot when I'm just kind of like being acted upon, um, it can be fine. I can live my life and, be a nice person and I'll survive. But when I really want to like feel like I'm at that next level, that's when I have to kind of take a step away from those things and figure out if that
Mhm.
relationship with myself and that thing, if that's really benefiting me.
Yeah, very well said. I love that. It's like holding yourself accountable for the life you really want, and it's can be like quite the arduous process, taking inventory of like what kind of beliefs have I like constructed and how are those serving me? Where did they come from? And what do I actually need to do to take alignment with the person I want to be? And I think, yeah, what you explained is that sort of difference between thriving and surviving. And it's like a common like thing with alcohol consumption too. And I extrapolate many of these things to like areas well beyond alcohol consumption, right? But it's like you're fine. And like even my drinking, like I definitely wasn't fine. I was like a big binge drinker, but it certainly was like drinking that a lot of people would be like, oh, whatever, you're just having fun kind of thing. It's like, no, I think, would have never been able to get where I want to go. And yeah, it's really interesting too, as you said, like it's like a higher plane of awareness. And I think in our language that sounds like hierarchical, but I think it's like a level of awareness we all have access to if we choose to explore our belief systems, and if we're
Mhm.
outsourcing our potential to societal programming, what other people think of us, what's normal, quote unquote, like all that stuff. Like if you outsource your patterns, behaviors, and lifestyle to that, as opposed to like your true integrity and inner knowing, as like, I deep down know that this behavior is not going to get me where I want to go, like that step, like you said, next level kind of living, which isn't anything like along the way for me, has been like really important to understand also like compassion for people, and knowing that like we're all on our own like journey of evolution. And like I've been in places where I wasn't where I wanted to be, but I didn't know that like I could take more accountability, for it. And so it is such like, I think one thing I always say too is like as you evolve and start to like take more responsibility for your life, like your continued opportunity for evolution is how you treat other people at different stages in their own awareness, because it can be frustrating at points when you're like, why are people still fighting over this shit, or like don't people see this or that or the other thing. But it's like that does us no good, to be like in a state of like that. That's the opportunity for continued growth, is like self-compassion and compassion for others. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, I just was gonna kind of say one more thing,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, go ahead.
just kind of reiterating what you said, which is two pieces, which is accountability and compassion, and they're almost at odds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, self-compassion, because we mentioned how like we're all kind of both biologically programmed and societally programmed to seek out these things. Um, so we have to show compassion to ourselves. Like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with me. But then, like you said, taking responsibility and accountability. And it's like, now I'm going to make these choices and I'm going to do what I need to rise above this, or to get away from this, and to not let someone else dictate what I'm going to do or what I'm going to believe or how I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I think we get trapped in a lot of dualistic thinking. Like, if you're accountable for yourself, it means like rigidity and discipline, and like self compassion can't coexist. But the more we can like integrate like seemingly opposing things, I think the healthier we become. And the more we can do that for ourselves, the more we can extend it to others. And it becomes like a really cool development to witness unfolding. Like, the more you can hold space for complexity within yourself and integrate the different facets of who you are, and like not be ashamed of your shadows and like compulsions, the more that like the happier and more peaceful we can be. Like, yeah, and it makes it so much, I wouldn't say like easy, but easier to accept like shameful aspects of ourselves or whatnot when we're actively taking action to be better, and work hard at growing and learning and loving ourselves and other people. So it's also cool. And so, yeah, this conversation has been wonderful, but I did want to end with like a few things. A, like, what's your vision for Nurture moving forward? Like, how do you see it being used? Like, I know we've talked about it being used in addiction, but like, how could it be used more broadly? And what do you see as the future for it? And then we'll end on like where everyone can find you.
Yeah, I think basically what you said, which is I would love to see Nurture in more clinicians' tool bags. So I would love to see like more treatment centers and more therapists and coaches and whatever saying like, okay, if this is what you're dealing with, look at Nurture, and this is how we can incorporate this into your treatment. So both on that clinical or kind of subclinical client, um, you know, relationship level, but then also on the self-help level, the self-discovery, that kind of thing, where someone's kind of exploring podcasts and they're like, all right, what productivity tools are out there? What tools are out there that I can try? Um, so there's a term, step down in care and step up in care, which is almost like, okay, now I'm ready to see a therapist, or you've been in treatment, or you're seeing a therapist and now you're ready to step down and, you know, take a break from that. So I would love to see it as kind of like a precursor to therapy. It's like, well, I'm not ready for this full commitment. I don't want to spend, $100 a session, $200 a session. So instead I'll spend $100 a year and try out Nurture and see what that's like. So I would love to just see it be kind of more ubiquitous as a level um, of care on that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great, because it's kind of like maintenance plans after therapy or building up to therapy, which is really wonderful. And the clinical setting, like, certainly such a good tool I could imagine for my clients as well, and just helping them have things to walk alongside, like through working with the client in their everyday lives, help them build these tools, because it is the types of things where in between sessions, it's like I always tell that to clients too, like, we'll get as far as we get in session by session. That's why I also do Voxer in between, because it's like so much comes in up in between sessions, and it's really, you get as much out of coaching as you're willing to put in specifically in between meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can hit on a lot on one-on-one calls, but it's really about the choices you're making day to day and how you're integrating everything you're learning as you go.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so last question is, where can everyone find you, the podcast? If you're, how can people download the app? Any other spaces, like if you have a newsletter, whatever the case may be, like drop all your deets right
Yeah, yeah. So the Adaptive Mind is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. There's also theadaptivemind.com, so you can find it there. Usually there'll be summaries or like high level tidbits from each of the episodes. And
Mm.
then Nurture's on the App Store and in the Play Store. So that's Neurture. It's like neural and nurture. So
Mm.
um, it's there and it's available, and you can download it and install it today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts and also listening to mine and elaborating on everything, all your insight. I really appreciate you being here. So, thanks everyone for tuning in, and like, share, subscribe, go download the Nurture apps. It's amazing. And until next time, bye.